Right, everyone. Today I want to introduce to you another DBT skill called opposite action. What this skill basically is acting opposite to our emotional urges to do or say something. Right? Sometimes our emotions aren't really helping us or can be very painful, and the skill can help change or even reduce that emotion. Um, the skills overall, it's based on like decades of research that approaching, confronting, or acting opposite to the behaviors associated with our emotions can lead to positive outcomes for us. This type of skill is used in treatment for many things like anxiety, depression, anger. So overall, each emotion has some sort of action urge, and we want to be able to identify both the emotion and the urge so we know how to act opposite. So in a bit, I'll go over some of the more common emotions and associated urges. But first, I want to provide a bit more information on when and how to use this skill. Action works best under certain circumstances. Right? So the first is when our emotion does not fit the facts of the situation. Right? So sometimes we know the facts about a situation, but still can't do what we know to be effective. One example of this is knowing something isn't dangerous, but still being terrified of it, like giving a presentation, right? Sometimes our emotions may be understandable, but not justified. So, what does that exactly mean, right? So, let's say the other day you went to cross the street and you're looking down at your phone, and you don't see the crossing signal changed, and the cars now have a green light to go, right? So, you walk a few steps into the street, and a car rushes by you a few feet in front of you, beeps their horn right in your face, it's extremely loud, and it passes by you at like lethal speeds, right? In that instance, your fear is definitely justified because there was a very real threat to your life. Now, let's say you go back to that same intersection the next day because it's on your way to work, let's say. You get to the crosswalk and you notice intense fear again popping up, right? Your heart rate is elevated, your skin is starting to sweat, you might notice your muscles tensing up, feeling of adrenaline in your body. So you start looking up and down the road. Look up and down several times, and there isn't a car in sight, right, at all. You don't see anything, and you do have a walking signal with 20 seconds left on the signal, let's say. Yet you still feel that really intense fear, and you just can't bring yourself to actually step into the road. Is your emotion justified here? Answer to that is actually no. Is it understandable? Yeah, absolutely. You just had a near-death experience just the other day, yesterday. Um, but today, the facts support that there's absolutely no threat when crossing the road, and is therefore unjustified. Even if you proceed to cross the street with your eyes closed, if there's no actual threat, in other words, no cars within like an entire mile, your fear is not justified by the actual facts of the situation. So you might want to use opposite action when your motion is not effective for meeting your goals, but is still really intense and long lasting. Right? You may be perfectly justified in your emotions in this scenario. Um, let's say, for example, you've been working really hard. You've been putting in like 70-hour work weeks, sacrificing a lot of family time to finish a really big project. And your boss comes by and calls you lazy because he doesn't think you're working hard enough, or he thinks you should be putting in 80-hour work weeks. Um, in that situation, you might be feeling anger. And I don't know about you, but I would be feeling very angry in that situation, especially for the sacrifices that I had been making. Um, and so the anger would be justified, right? You might notice some urges to scream at your boss or do something, escalate it a little further, pick up your keyboard and hit him, or something like that. I don't know. Whatever those urges are, though, doing so, acting on them, can lead to problematic outcomes like getting fired. If you escalate even further, jail time, a lawsuit. And these are overall can be considered ineffective, right? You might need your income to live, put food on the table, support your family. So opposite action can help prevent those negative consequences, right? This is also helpful for like, let's say depression. If you have the urge to maybe stay in bed all day and generally like avoid some of the things that you need to be doing or would be helpful for you to be doing or would be effective for you to be doing. Opposite action can help with this avoidance if you're experiencing avoidance, which might cause more problems or prevent you from obtaining relief. All right, so how do we actually go about doing opposite action? So step number one is to identify and name the emotion you are feeling and want to change, right? So you might want to use your mindfulness, observe, and describe skills here, which I covered in another video that I can link to in this corner. So I'm noticing the emotion of fear, right? Next, you want to check the facts to see if your emotion fits the facts of the situation. So I'm going back to the previous example of the crosswalk. So I'm noticing fear. There are no cars around, and I have a walking symbol with 20 seconds left on it. If your emotion doesn't fit the facts and is therefore not justified, you want to start to identify and describe your action urges. So I would want to turn around and go home, and I want to avoid crossing the street, right? So now you want to ask yourself if acting on or expressing this emotion is effective in this situation. So if I need to cross the street to get to my job on the other side, acting on my urge to turn around and go home or avoid won't be effective for me because not showing up might get me fired, right? So next, you want to actually act opposite to the emotion's urges and do it all the way, right? So I want to take that first step into the sidewalk, right, or into the crosswalk, and I want to keep going. I'm going to go all the way, right? I'm likely going to feel some intense anxiety the first time, and even likely the next several times. However, after a while, what we know is that continued practice overall reduces the intensity over time. When I say doing this skill all the way, what that means is adopting not only actions, but also words and thinking that are opposite to the emotion that you want to change as well, right? So I might cross, but have the thought the entire way that I'm going to get hit by a car and die. This is the end for me, right? I might even get someone to carry me across, right? I might, cover my head the entire time while I'm being carried across. Right? You're still crossing the street, but you're not doing it all the way or as effectively as possible. None of those are doing opposite action all the way. Right? And lastly, we want to continue doing opposite action until the emotion actually goes down or goes away, right? This might mean going back and forth on the crosswalk until I can get across without any sort of like hesitation or fear or just like a reduced amount of fear. All right, so we just went through an example of acting opposite to fear, which overall means just approaching the things that we fear rather than avoiding it. Like I said earlier, like all the emotions that we have some sort of associated urge with them. So we can go over some of the more common ones. We have like anger, envy, jealousy, sadness, shame, and guilt. So with anger, the urge is to overall attack. And the opposite action in that situation would be to gently avoid or keep your distance, even maybe do some calming activities like a deep breathing exercise, like square breathing. You could also try putting yourself in the other person's shoes and imagine having sympathy or empathy for the other person instead of blaming them. So that is, again, part of like that doing opposite action all the way. It's not just removing yourself from the situation, but it's also changing, going opposite to your thoughts. Like instead of to blame, you might want to, again, do the sympathy or empathy. Right? So with jealousy, when jealousy isn't justified, the opposite action is basically just to let go of controlling others or the situation, or just share what you have with others. When our envy is not justified, opposite action would be to count your blessings and maybe inhibit your urges to diminish what other people have that you don't have. Right? When our sadness is not justified, or maybe it's like lasted too long, The opposite action is to get active instead of withdrawing or becoming like very passive. We want to get moving even when we don't necessarily feel like it. So with shame, we want to stop hiding our behavior and stop hiding our behavior around people who we know won't reject us. Right? So even if we did something that violated our sense of right and wrong, we might not think others will be disappointed in us. We would still want to like come clean and attempt to repair the mistake. Right? Even if you're feeling unjustified guilt, you want to act opposite to those urges to apologize, and maybe you want to change your body posture by sitting up tall, looking innocent and proud, maintaining eye contact, and keeping your voice steady and clear. So overall, that is the skill of opposite action. Hope that skill is helpful for you guys, and you guys are being as effective as you can be.